That's like having 13% of the population go, sure, love that. So I'm disturbed that it's as high as it is. But having said that, it's very rare you get any number that low anyway on any issue, right? So, I mean, I guess I'll take it, but 13%. He's bragging about his policy that has 13% support. And to boot, that policy is deeply immoral, deeply unethical. And it's like rolling back the clock to the 1800s and saying, we don't care about international law, we don't care about war crimes, we don't care about the Nuremberg Tribunal, the Geneva Convention, and we're just going to steal your property and do what we want with it. And we'll make a buck. Right? Again, this is like Jared Kushner took $2 billion from the Saudis, and so now he's their fucking puppet. Again, how much money do you think Jared is taking from Israel? Jared Kushner is one, you can think of him, but also Miriam Adelson, big pro-Israel donor. She gave Trump $100 million this election, and the quid pro quo was, you're going to let Israel annex the entire West Bank. That's what you're going to do. Now Israel's talking about annexing South Syria. So, and Trump is going above and beyond like he always does for his big money donors, where he says, oh, not only can you have the West Bank, here, I'm going to take Gaza and I'll build it out, and then the Israelis can have it. That's what's really going to happen here, right? But I said it before, I'll say it again. If you are in the U.S. military and you are deployed to do any of these imperialistic actions, if you are sent to do old school colonialism, every single U.S. soldier should resign in protest and say we're conscientious objectors. We are not going to violate international law. We are not going to violate U.S. law. We are not going to do genocide and ethnic cleansing. We're not going to stand by while this happens. This is all illegal. This is all unconstitutional. This is all immoral. This is all like, we are the baddies very clearly, right? So every U.S. soldier should resign in that scenario. I really hope that this video gets in front of some people who are in that position, because we have to do it, bro. What are we going to do? I'm sorry, but we've had these debates before. We've had these arguments before. I was just following orders doesn't cut it, right? When you're shoving an 80-year-old Palestinian grandma off of her land, which, by the way, she's also starving because Israel's not allowing in the food. You shove her off her land, and then what? You're going to look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, I'm the good guy, I'm doing the Lord's work, I'm helping people out? No, you're a fucking imperialist and a colonialist, and you need to understand that. You need to realize you need to take a moral stand on that. You do. So I'm 13%, bro. 13% support his Gaza policy. Super low, but honestly, still disturbing. Because that number should be fucking zero. Look, the way to test the logic is to always flip the scenario. Let's say China did a genocide in Texas and killed hundreds of thousands or millions of Texans. And then the president of China says, it's okay, we're going to take Gaza, or excuse me, we're going to take Texas, we're going to own Texas, and we're going to build some nice casinos. We're going to build some casinos, some hotels, and no, the Texans won't be allowed back in, but it's okay, because I'm going to make it beautiful. It's not for them, but I'll make it beautiful for us. We would say these people, like, these are criminals akin to a Nazi level. That's what we would say. But somehow, when you reverse the scenario, I don't know, man, people struggle with this notion that, like, we could be the baddies, right? Like, people really struggle with that. Like, they think evil people who do evil things wake up every morning and twist their evil mustache and go, "Mwahaha, I will now do evil things." No, there can be evil people who do evil things who still tell the pretty little lies to themselves and pretend like, well, of course I'm the good guy. Right? And that's what Trump does, and that's what Trump is. But the fact of the matter is, we got to realize, man, good and evil exist. And this is fucking evil. And we need to open our eyes to that. No reason to fucking, nuance monger yourself into having oatmeal for brains. This is what it looks like. So, catastrophic numbers here for MAGA, and they're only gonna get worse. Elon's numbers are gonna get worse. Trump's numbers are gonna get worse. The policies that we're talking 7% support the Medicaid cut, and they cut $880 billion in the bill that just passed through the House. What was it? 9%, 8% that support cutting food stamps. They just cut it $230 billion. 13% support this foreign policy initiative that Trump is bragging about. What happened? I thought, the warmongers. Kamala's a warmonger. Liz Cheney's a warmonger. They're warmongers. We don't like that. She never met somebody she didn't want to shoot at. This is like stuff Trump was saying before the election. Now he's in office. He out-warmongers the worst neocon warmongers. We're going to steal Gaza? Like, what the fuck? All right, I got to calm down. I might have a stroke on air if I keep going, but you get the gist of it. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.
It immediately started raining, so I'm just gonna go into Kroger and back.
Well, you found your... I'm impressed. Yes, indeed I am. Stay the path. Can't you see you've fallen for their trap? You... Have you seen my corporeal flesh? I'm sorry. Who are you? I don't remember anything.
I can forge weapons for you. Do come back.
Oh, Honorable One, I deep within. Will you continue?
Oh, I see.
Have you heard? If you are it, oh, what a horrible... I simply must... My grandfather, he often visited Stonefang Mine. Most of them have, but among them, he could this... But among them, he found a miracle stone shard, which he gave to me. Could this too be a sign from God?
Are you begging for a magic lesson?
Be careful how... Normally it would not be granted. I had to make an exception for this. Are you begging for a match? Be careful how... Normally I had to...
Thou seek then soul of the mind, key to life's ether, soul of the lost withdrawn from its vessel. Let strength be granted. Art thou done? Main thine.
Now, IBM's strategy of using off-the-shelf parts for their PC meant that the industry around their hardware grew rapidly, as did the uptake, which meant that those of us wanting or needing to use a computer would likely have to embrace this once called quick and dirty operating system, and therefore its command line driven interface. This is pretty much all you get when you turn on a PC running DOS. A drive label and a flashing prompt. Okay, good luck with that. From this point on, intuitiveness goes out of the window. It was up to you to learn and understand exactly how to navigate your system, how to start programs, how to configure your memory, how to edit files, how to copy files, how to change your system configuration, all using text-based commands. Now, this wasn't necessarily something new. After all, most computers of that era would throw you straight into a similar situation upon boot. But for those of us who weren't hobbyists or enthusiasts, perhaps someone just using a computer for their job, this wasn't the most user-friendly situation. This was something that a little company called Apple had the foresight to understand. Steve Jobs had many talents, but he was particularly good at turning something created by and for tech heads into something that the masses could not only use, but actually want to use.
The Mac team's vision was an inexpensive computer as powerful and sophisticated as IBM's PC, with an added playfulness that would make it attractive to young people like themselves. And they wanted it easy to use. With Macintosh, there are no complicated commands to be memorized and typed into the machine. All you do is move an arrow with a selection device called a mouse and point to what you want from a menu of options presented on the screen.
Now, this is an Apple Mac, first released in 1984 and described as revolutionary by the New York Times, and for good reason. Rather than being a bulky system of components that would boot into a virtual abyss, the Macintosh would take users straight into an intuitive graphical user interface controlled by a mouse, featuring a single button which was quicker to pick up than your mum on Burns night. But this wasn't even the first machine with a GUI. It wasn't even the first Apple machine with a GUI. That machine was the Apple Lisa, launched in January 1983, with the graphical desktop idea actually nabbed from the Xerox Alto workstation that Jobs had seen during a 1979 visit to Xerox PARC. Regardless of its origin, the world of computing now had two distinct paths. One, the clunkier but popular IBM PC, the other, the smooth and finessed world of graphical user interfaces, spearheaded by Apple, but quickly followed by the likes of the Atari ST and the Amiga. Of course, the IBM PC wasn't going to be left in the literal dark. In fact, various developers had created GUIs to run on it, including Digital Research themselves, who launched their GEM desktop environment in February 1985. This allowed users to plug a mouse into their PC's serial port and navigate their files using the same point-and-click action that Mac users were already basking in. By this point, Microsoft had licensed their operating system to hundreds of other companies, and with hardware manufacturers creating clones of the IBM PC hardware, they had quickly overtaken IBM's PC-DOS as the de facto operating system, although they were both completely compatible. In April 1985, MS-DOS 3.0 was launched, which significantly improved on previous versions, allowing, among other things, support for networks and higher density floppy disks. But Microsoft weren't blind to the world around them and had realised they needed to jump on the graphical user interface bandwagon as well, which they would do so with the launch of Microsoft Windows in November 1985, which was developed by a team led by Scott A. McGregor, the man behind Xerox PARC's original Windows system.
How much do you think this advanced operating environment is worth? Wait just 1 minute before you answer. Watch as Windows integrates Plug-in 123 with Miami Vice. Now we can take this Ferrari and paste it right into Windows Right. Now, how much do you think Microsoft Windows is worth? Don't answer. Wait until you see Windows Right and Windows Paint, and to listen to what else you get at no extra charge. The MS-DOS executive, an appointment calendar, a card file, a notepad, a clock, a control panel, a terminal, a print spool, a RAM driver, and can you believe it? Reversi. That's right. All these features in Reversi, all for just, how much did you guess? 500? 1,000? Even more? No, it's just $99. That's right. It's $99. It's an incredible value, but it's true. It's Windows from Microsoft. Order today.
Now, Windows 1 is a far cry from what we have today. Windows couldn't be overlapped, and even compared to Mac OS, it looked like a toddler's fever dream. But for a lot of users, it changed how they interacted with their computer. Thanks to the inroads Microsoft had already made with the original equipment manufacturers and businesses alike, Windows could be distributed to more users and make more of an impact than other IBM PC-compatible GUIs had done so far. And despite that, it didn't sell tremendously well though. In December 1987, Windows 2 was released, allowing access to expanded memory and shortly after introducing a protected mode kernel, the ability to run MS-DOS programs in tandem under a virtual 8086 mode, and the welcome addition of preemptive multitasking. However, it was Windows 3, released in 1990, where the software really began to shine. Up until this point, most programs were still written for DOS. Sure, Windows was a nice to have and it allowed you to keep everything organised and accessible and usable, but with computing power being somewhat limited, the additional overheads created by the graphical user interface meant that DOS programs were faster, used less memory, and just generally were more compatible, given that other users didn't always have a copy of Windows to open files with. It was also far more common for developers to create DOS software than Windows compatible software, given that almost every PC owner had DOS, but only a subset had Windows. What everyone does have though is the internet, and you should get on board with it with a sponsor, Squarespace. Especially if you want a nice website. You can pick from so many styles and use Blueprint AI to get the best layout and style options, along with optimized SEO tools so that you can show up in Google for the keywords that matter. It's just easy to snap features in and out, even easier than Windows 95 plug and play. But one of my favourite abilities is to swap between mobile and desktop views so that you can optimize your content for every device and make sure it looks great. Just head to Squarespace for a free trial, and when you're ready, go to squarespace.com/nostalgianerd to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
I'm using Windows 386. So all my applications are running at once. My report right now is scattered all over my disk. Whoa, Windows will pull these files together real quick.
But by 1990, computers were getting faster. Not only had the 286 processor been out for several years, but many users now had a 386, offering significant power over previous systems. Windows 3 then would play into this, offering virtual memory, which allowed the system to use hard drive space effectively as working memory. Windows 3 also looked a hell of a lot better than previous versions, making use of that sexy VGA mode. With Windows 3, Microsoft also started dabbling in large-scale launch events.
Today we're introducing Microsoft Windows version 3. Our vision is that there will be a personal computer on every desktop, and it will be the key tool for the information age.
Hosted at the New York City Center Theater with 6,000 attendees, it was also broadcast across North America in various Microsoft social fairs. Spending $3 million on these events, Bill Gates labeled it the most extravagant, extensive, and expensive software introduction ever. The idea with Windows 3 was to make it more appealing to the public, given that previous versions were seen more as a business tool, and the plan actually started to work, with more OEM manufacturers including the operating system out of the box. This then was the first version of Windows to achieve commercial success outside of Microsoft's traditional supply routes, and this demand led to a slew of programs being developed to run inside the Windows framework. It also shook up Microsoft's direction and future marketing plans, which would be key. However, regardless of which version you had, DOS was always the master here. Your PC always had to boot to DOS. After all, it ran on DOS. This wasn't Windows' fault, it was just the world it was born into. Windows was simply a program that you called from DOS. It was a shell that ran on top, and that's all it could ever be. Sure, it had some fancy schmancy features, but it was ultimately just a DOS program that made your life a little easier, which not only meant that it was limited by the constraints of DOS, but also, if you wanted to run anything resource intensive, then flipping to DOS was really the only way to go, given the extra layers of abstraction Windows added between a program and the system hardware. The overheads for your average PC at the time were just too great for that, and that's even before tackling the frequent resource and application errors that Windows would throw. In June 91, Microsoft would launch MS-DOS 5, a significant upgrade over previous DOS versions, and the first which allowed you to upgrade your current DOS version. Because of this, Microsoft also chose to do a slightly bigger marketing campaign than they had in the past. At the time, Brad Chase was in charge of the launch. Chase originally joining Microsoft as the product manager for Microsoft Works and Office on the Macintosh. Having gained experience running promotions for Apple, he elected to add a bit of spice to this campaign.
The word on the screen is, you're out of memory! Oh no! Gimme 5!
This was a two-pronged attack. Firstly, visiting user groups to disseminate and explain the new features, and secondly, pushing the new upgrade with TV advertising and print, holding a launch event on a large boat in New York with Dave Brubeck performing his song Take 5. This launch worked so well that in some stores people were actually queuing up at midnight the night before launch.
Here's the future, it's no dream. Customers in a steady stream.
But by April 92, Bill Gates knew that PC users needed more, demanded more in fact. Although they had just released Windows 3.1, it was already lagging behind. Microsoft not only had competition from other platforms, but also had competition from its old partner, IBM, who had just released OS 2 2.0, an operating system Microsoft had actually been helping write until Windows 3 took off. But also now an operating system one step ahead of the traditional DOS and Windows combination, featuring a 32-bit API for native programs and the ability to run DOS software. Rather than just providing an environment to run Windows programs, the OS 2 Workplace shell provided an environment for users to manage programs, files and devices intuitively. It was marketed by IBM as a better DOS than DOS and a better Windows than Windows, which indeed it was. Despite their huge market advantage, Bill Gates realized that if Microsoft didn't keep up with the times, then the future of PC operating systems could easily fall into someone else's hands, at a time when the stakes were highest. With this, two projects were initiated. One, codenamed Razzle, and actually based around the OS 2 framework Microsoft had helped develop, would be launched in July 1993 as Windows NT 3.1, offering similar advantages to OS 2 and aimed at high-end professional and server markets. The other was initially coined Win93, designed to be the next significant upgrade for the everyday user and one that needed to beat the balls off everything else, with a penned release date of June 1993. On the 5th of March 1992, an email from Senior Vice President and Project Lead Brad Silverberg stated, "Our mission is to deliver system software for high-volume platforms, i.e. personal systems. This means that major, ongoing investments will be for low-end desktops, notebooks, portable machines, pens, etc. Win93 will focus on usability, especially the shell. Ours is rather long in the tooth and we know we need improvements. This is our chance to do something cool. There are a number of other sub-goals for Win93, one of which is to make Windows a lot more functional too, the things today you have to drop down to MS-DOS to accomplish. Everything you can do from DOS should be available from Windows." And this is really key, because Microsoft weren't just producers of operating systems, they were producers of software. And within DOS, the likes of Microsoft Office was already in fierce competition with products like Lotus 1-2-3 and WordPerfect, big players in the world of business. We'll come back to that later. But by 1994, Windows hadn't really advanced much further, other than incremental updates on the existing product. We were now on version 3.11, Windows for Workgroups, yeah! But things were heating up. This was now a time when PCs weren't just prevalent in America. Even your average UK household would probably have a PC in the corner on one of those desks with a dot matrix or even a bubble jet, if you were lucky, printer stowed safely underneath. Plus there was a little thing called the internet that people were just starting to get excited about.
I didn't see this. They didn't tell me about it. Is this new?
This is OS2 Warp. This isn't what you're used to using.
In that time, IBM had released 2 significant releases of OS2, with OS2 Warp 3 their latest and greatest offering. Whilst Apple were about to launch Mac OS 7.5, introducing the Apple Guide, the control strip, and various methods for customizing the desktop. Win93 then was running behind, and that's mainly due to the design changes made along the way. Initially, it was developed to go hand in hand with 32-bit subsystems Project Panther and Cougar, along with Jaguar, essentially DOS 7. But it was felt that the whole concept of a separate command line driven operating system was getting too long in the tooth, and all these projects were bundled under the heading of Project Chicago as a wholly integrated graphical operating system. As the successors of Microsoft MS-DOS, Windows 3.1 and Windows for Workgroups 3.11, Windows Chicago is the next major release of the standard operating system for the desktop and portable PC. There is something for everyone, whether it's a more intuitive way to work, new capabilities like surfing the information highway, or better support for managing a 1000 PC installation site. This is the blurb at the top of the review guide handed out with preview copies of the then named Windows Chicago, along with its main selling points. Chicago makes PCs even easier to use. Chicago is faster and more powerful operating system. Chicago integrates network, connectivity, and manageability. Sounds like some pretty sensible and straightforward improvements, right? So how did we get from this to this? Well, there lies the brilliance of the Microsoft marketing team at this time, who played every angle pretty perfectly. Before this point, Microsoft's strategy for new products was silence. Everything was hush-hush. Everything was top secret, which led to speculation, and it led to anticipation, but it didn't lead to many column inches. After all, there was nothing to write home about. It was actually Brad Chase, the marketing lead for Windows 95, who made the call that actually it was time to turn that upside down and tell the world everything they could, in a bid to not just alleviate any fears people had about this weird world of computing, but also to get other companies producing software and accessories, themselves then adding to the hyperbole. Brad had 2 goals with the marketing campaign. The first was to bring computers into the mainstream, and the second being to make the product a consumer phenomenon. 2 goals which were actually perfectly aligned to what the new OS hoped to be. Brad named this strategy the E strategy, educate, excite and engage, for obvious reasons. And as part of his strategy, the other Brad Silverberg, decided to put Chicago through the largest beta test to date, which resulted in 400,000 people taking part. Part of which was the preview program, which cost users $30 to get a sneak peek of the upcoming OS. So in this way, Microsoft not only got paid for most of their bugs to be ironed out, but also the press treadmill began a good year in advance. By September 1994, the press had a name, Windows 95, and the information was flowing. We do want people to move forward, just as we wanted people to move from 3.0 to 3.1, said Brad Struss. Good lord, how many Brads worked in this company? Software was already beginning to label itself Windows 95 ready, and discussions around 32-bit API calls were there to whet the appetites of anyone concerned. And before 1994 was out, there was already a slew of multimedia experiences, videos and books claiming to know the full details of this revolutionary new operating system, most of which focused on the iconic start button to lure people in. After all, this single button would be the gateway to, well, everything. And Microsoft knew that. Most press coverage would concentrate around how much simpler Windows 95 made your PC, along with how much more stable it would be, with lots of talk about how the very limiting and user-unfriendly DOS would be pushed aside entirely. In reality, DOS wasn't discarded, but it was hidden away, designed to run underneath Windows, just like prior versions, but in a fashion where a regular user just wouldn't see or experience it. This was for a number of reasons, including development time, but chiefly it allowed backwards compatibility with a lot of existing DOS and 16-bit software, something they didn't have to worry about on their NT platform. Add to this the new plug-and-play system that meant peripherals could, in theory, just be plugged in and they were good to go, alongside a variety of other improvements, and it felt like 95 would be streets ahead of anything prior, in the world of PCs anyway. In reality, this is the same thing Steve Jobs and Apple had done years prior, but now Microsoft were doing it with the mass market already in situ. Microsoft had initially touted the spring of 95 as the launch window, however this came and went. But the press didn't seem to tire. In fact, they just got more and more hyped about it, thanks in part to the E strategy. Borrowing a little from their DOS 5 launch, Microsoft had dedicated teams working directly to educate, excite and engage business customers, OEM computer manufacturers, third-party developers and the press. But absolutely key was engaging home users. After all, that demand alone would infuse everyone else. Although DOS 5 had regions where people were queuing for midnight, this needed to be replicated around the world in every major city for it to be a proper success. To aid with this, Microsoft launched a series of promos and collaborations leading up to the launch, including a Windows 95 Sapporo Black Label beer over in Japan. The campaign culminated in a VHS called Microsoft Windows 95 Video Guide. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, this is no news to you, even in 2025. Featuring Matthew Perry alongside Jennifer Aniston and written by Seinfeld contributor Jonathan Gross, this was definitely something to remember, or not, depending on your perspective.
Oh, no. See, that's a coward's laugh.
Nobody calls Joystick Johnny a coward!
Man.
With Windows 95 having been released in manufacturing on July 14th, 1995 for English languages, the retail launch date was now set for August 24th, 1995. With other languages following shortly after. By this point, Microsoft had people coming to them asking if they could help promote the product, wanting to be part of this ridiculous hype train. Brad recounts when Don King phoned him up to try and get Windows 95 into boxing matches.
I got a call from Don King, the boxing promoter.
What did he want?
He wanted to find a way to co-market Windows 95 in boxing matches.
Well, that's funny.
And if you remember Don King, he has this really distinctive voice. So
yeah,
talking on the phone with him was really an out-of-this-world experience.
Along with Steven Spielberg, who wanted to pitch in on the marketing campaign.
I've chosen you to direct our next project, so welcome to the studio.
But it was Doonesbury running a week-long series of comic strips making fun of Windows 95 that really solidified things for Brad. He recounts telling his team that they had reached their goals a week before launch because of it. And indeed, they had, because the midnight queues they were hoping for were absolutely rife.
The cyber hype has been relentless.
Go for it!
It's been worldwide.
There's never been any sale like it ever.
And it's paying off.
Launching around the globe at midnight on the 24th of August 1995, with the initial queues seen in New Zealand, copied around the globe.
Is that hot?
I think it has a lot to do with marketing hype. Just want to give it a whack, see what it's all about. Just want to give it a whack, see what it's all about. Just want to give it a whack, see what it's all about.
Those down under were the first to swarm over Windows 95.
But things were just getting started. As eager punters were already at home, frantically installing their new operating system and potentially working or not, the Microsoft campus in Redmond, Washington State was gearing up for a launch circus the likes of which the world had never seen. Probably for the best. Now, I feel like this is something we need to work through step by step to really take in the sensational disregard for dignity that was on display here.
Since then, telling us over and over
Details of the event were mostly spread online, which at the time was a pretty impressive feat, but it's no shock to say that 2,000 guests attended, along with 500 members of the press, magazine writers and various tech celebs of the time, including Lance Ulanoff of PC Magazine, who recalled getting bussed to a campus, weaving through a series of greeting tents before being marched into the presentation pavilion where Bill Gates took the stage. In an article on Medium.com, he reports there being palpable excitement that day, which appeared tailor-made for the launch.
No, I guess at the moment I'm not dating much.
My closest ally is the team.
I have to say my husband.
Pandas. Best day is August 25th because it's the day after we ship so I can get married.
After several developer stories, the audience were introduced to the real star of the show, that iconic start button.
I think that there's probably that in every single program, but the readout from the meeting that I had was that it was incredible also how well the Senate and the House people were working together. There were a lot of frank conversations about, I don't like this, I don't like that, and we agreed that we're all going to work together and get a bill to the president's desk as soon as...
What? You had a razor-thin majority in the House. There were people who weren't sure, and then they got directly called by President Trump, who said, like, basically, vote yes or you'll, they'll find you in a river.
Possible.
Finding ways that in Medicaid is one thing. Actually deciding to cut Medicaid outlays is an entirely different thing. Is that on the table? Right now they're on track, Medicaid, to increase by $2.4 trillion through 2035. If you were to take off just under $1 trillion, $880 billion, it would still be rising 2% a year when Medicare and Social Security haven't really increased as a percentage of federal outlays since 2007, while Medicaid is soaring up 10%, up to 10% of federal outlays from 7%. Will that be on the table? Would the president let that happen, or is it too politically toxic?
President Trump has made it clear that he wants Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security to be safe for all people who deserve it. Now, if there's fraud...
At some point, they're gonna have to drop the hammer. So what this guy's about to say is, we don't want to cut Medicaid, but if we find that there's fraud, then what are you gonna do? Obviously, yeah, who deserve it? At some point, they're gonna have to drop the hammer on this, though. There is going to be, like in the reconciliation package or in any of the committee meetings they're gonna do, where they're gonna outline what exactly they're going to cut in order to fulfill the budgetary requirements in the framework that was passed yesterday. They are going to have to explicitly say, yes, we want these cuts to Medicaid. They already are, TBH. They're still holding back just a little bit.
Not anywhere in government, of course we're going to look at it, but he 100% is behind keeping all those programs safe for the people who need those programs.
Are you, have you become a big tariff guy yet, Ken? I don't think you were before.
You know, the interesting thing is that we've got a deadline coming up where the president yesterday, markets might not have noticed, extended by saying that we're going to deal with Mexico and Canada presumably the same time we deal with everything else. The schedule is that there's a study coming out on the 1st of April, and then after that the president's going to decide what to do about tariff policy for all countries. And so I think that
so this is where that misinformation came from, the idea that the tariffs were put back to April 2nd, but they're still on March 4th. Yeah. I don't know, man.
There are things that we can do when tariffs come in to make sure that the composite package is very, very much supply side. And so if you were to see, somebody were to say something to you like, hey, my country just took their income tax and cut it a lot and then got some of the revenue back with the value-added tax, then, economists are saying, oh, that's going to increase growth. And then somehow there are people who think that if you do a tariff, that it's going to be the opposite. But if you look at the analysis that'll soon be coming out of the White House, we've got a whole bunch of studies on this. You'll see that President Trump has a super pro-growth agenda.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I bet. I bet.
Time for the hot topic of the hour. President Trump says he is moving ahead with tariffs on Canada and Mexico during his first cabinet meeting yesterday. Watch.
I'm not stopping the tariffs.
We saw this.
That's going.
Moore writes this in a blog. Who's really being removed by ICE tonight? The child who would have discovered the cure for cancer in 2046? The ninth grade nerd who would have stopped that asteroid that's going to hit us in 2032? Do we care? The White House shop.
When did it become cool to mock Michael Moore for being right about everything? It seems to me like he spent his entire life being based. But at some point, people decided that he was kind of like a mockable lib. I don't know. When did, like, what was the framework shift on that? It's fat and ugly shaming too. Yeah, it's just people being like, oh, you're fat, oh, you're fat. But like everything, what has he said that's wrong?
Back with White House Deputy Press Secretary.
The Iraq War. Yeah, that's true. A lot of the smearing against him came because he was very vocally against the Iraq War. That was the, October 7th of its time, where if you were, dissenting, you would have your life and career ruined across the board.
Kush Desai responding with this. Michael Moore is free to visit the quantum computing and particle physics lab. The White House put out a statement as well.
Democrats view the world versus the way the rest of us view the world. When you look at polling on how satisfied people are with the direction things are going, Democrats are only 5% satisfied. Compare that with independents, 30% satisfied, Republicans nearly 70% satisfied. It's a completely different planet depending how you view the world. And independents and Republicans, overall Americans say, things seem much better, 20% more satisfied than they were just in January. And Democrats cannot get out of their own way. All they see.
Are you really bragging about 30% independent satisfaction? Like that's the metric you're going to go with? More than 2/3 of independents are unsatisfied with the direction the country's going. You're going to pretend this is a Democrat problem?
And the hate. And I never heard Michael Moore say a peep about Laken Riley's murder.
Oh my fucking God. I don't know why I looked at this video.
President Trump just announced his tariffs on Mexico and Canada will go into effect on March the 4th. He also said China will be charged an additional 10% tariff. Peter Navarro.
Is Michael Moore even relevant anymore? Well, an offhand statement from him got a response from Carolyn Levitt, the fucking White House press coordinator, so I would say, yeah.
Joins us. He's Mr. Trump's senior trade and manufacturing advisor, joining us now. Why the extra 10%?
Oh, this is the guy who got Canada to pull out talks with us because he said that we should, Navarro. Thank you, Navarro. That we should redraw the border between U.S. and Canada.
Tariffs on China, Peter.
Stuart, just let me say it's so nice to see you again. And then let me get very, very serious here. A little fentanyl 101. Fentanyl is killing Americans at the rate of a minimum 75,000 a year, and it's probably 300,000 human American souls a year. That fentanyl comes from China, comes over to Mexico and Canada. The cartels mix it. And it's not just the fentanyl that kills, Howard. This stuff is so low cost that it's used to spike heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. And by the way, people out there taking Xanax or Oxycontin, a lot of that can be counterfeit, and it's laced with fentanyl. It makes it more addictive, and it makes it more potent. So the president is seeing all this information. He's been watching this, and people are dying, and we're not seeing enough progress on that. It's just as simple as that. China could stop that in a day.
Exactly.
And it has not.
So that's what the extra 10% tariff is all about. Do something about fentanyl and do it now. That's the negotiating here. Okay, then we've got the president is threatening to slap a 25% tariff on imports from the European Union. What does Europe have to do to get those tariffs to go away?
reciprocal trade. It's a beautiful concept, Stuart. And what President Trump is trying to do is a major restructuring of the international trade order, as they call it, which has been set up to fleece Americans. We have, and this is a fact, dispute me if you want, we'll have that conversation, but it is a fact that every major country...
I'd never imagined that it could get to this point, that the right-wing obsession with manufacturing a victim complex could extend from the tried and true, you know, the ones we're familiar with. DEI means that white people are being persecuted, anti-racism is racism against whites, so on and so forth, to this seemingly like cut from whole cloth, like just out of nowhere, false reality, where America is the most disadvantaged trade partner in the world. Not just Trump's first term, where it was like individual trade deals might be bad to us or whatever, you know, but now it's like, actually, we're getting fucked on every front, on every level. We're actually disadvantaged in every conceivable way. We're the most bullied country in the world. It's incredible how desperate we are to be victims.
In the world, which we have trade deficits with, including all the ones in the EU, have both higher tariffs and non-tariff barriers. And I love to use the example of cars. If you take a $50,000 BMW, make it in Bavaria, gets on a boat in Bremerhaven, comes on over here, the first thing that happens is the German car maker gets a VAT tax rebate, right? So that car sells for something like in the low 40s here after we put the low 2.5% tariff, okay? Yep. We try to sell a Cadillac over there. First thing that happens is we get hit with the 10%.
Please, help me. Well, you are a sane one, aren't you? My name is Ridiel. Please, liberate me from this cell. I have precious little time. I must retrieve an article from my corpse. As you can see, my body is trapped in another. I've no interest in my corporeal flesh. I will soon fade into...
All right, guys. So I got a video here that I think you'll enjoy. I certainly enjoyed it. But look, in order to be a right-wing commentator in today's day and age, you either have to know nothing about what you're talking about, or you have to be a liar. Like, there's really no way around it. You cannot be a leader in the MAGA commentariat if you tell the truth. If you tell the truth, and if you know what you're talking about, because everything, we are so far gone, we've crossed the line. The line is like 17 miles back there. That's how much we've crossed the line, right? And so you have to end up defending the most absurd thing anybody's ever defended. And look, some of these people are idiots, and then others are liars, right? And it varies case by case. But here we have Representative Malinowski, Democrat from New Jersey, I believe. And he's on CNN, just sort of a mild-mannered guy. I'm sure if I went through his record with a fine-tooth comb, I'm sure I'd find some votes that I don't agree with, right? And, you know, so I'm not necessarily singing this guy's praises in terms of his voting record. But he was put up against Kevin O'Leary. Is that his name? I think it's Kevin O'Leary on CNN. And this guy, we've known this guy is loathsome for a while, right? I remember there was that Oxfam report that came out years ago, and it said something like, the 27 richest people in the world have more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. It was some fact like that. It's only gotten worse since then, by the way. Now it's like the richest, like 3 people or 10 people or whatever, have more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. And this dude went on TV, and I shit you not, he said, well, that's a good thing, because then it gives the people at the bottom something to aspire to. Yeah. The fact that those words can come out of anybody's mouth should be disturbing. Like the idea, bro, we live in a meritocracy, just work harder and you'll get further. Again, that's the biggest myth I've ever heard. We have millions, tens of millions of people in this country alone that are working poor. That means they work a full-time job and they still can't pay the bills. Don't tell. I personally know people who work 2 or 3 jobs and were living at or just below the poverty line. Hardest working people I've ever met. The idea that the harder you work, the further you go is not true. It's also not true that the smarter you are, the further you go. That's not true at all. Unfortunately, in this dystopian late-stage capitalist system, oftentimes the most shameless and the most exploitative people rise to the top, or you're already at the top because you got daddy's money. Right? So just total misunderstanding of the way the world works. Total capitalist cuck. I can't say enough negative stuff about him. But they're going to talk about Doge here and Elon. And, oh, this is glorious. Because O'Leary, like, he's so smug and so arrogant, but he just runs into a brick wall of reality. Here we go.
There's no way to be surgically precision in this. You have to cut more because you just don't know. There's no way to do it. Remember, we've never audited government for 100 years. Never done this before. You may not like it.
Tom doesn't think that's right. Tom, what's your reaction to that? The government's not audited.
Every agency of the federal government, it helps to know some things if we're going to have this debate. Every agency of the federal government is audited by independent inspectors general. USAID was audited over 60 times last year. And one of the first things that Donald Trump and Elon Musk did was to fire all of the inspectors general. They fired the auditors, and they put in charge this billionaire with his 50 child interns who know absolutely nothing about the federal government. And Kevin, like what you're talking about, it might work for a company that makes widgets, because we can do without the company that makes widgets for a few months while you get in there and you restructure it. You can't do that to the FAA unless people aren't going to fly in planes for the next 4 or 5 months. You can't do that to the Defense Department unless you don't want to defend this country for the next 4 or 5 months. It's ridiculous that we're even having this argument, and I'm someone who believes there is waste in government and there are ways to get at it, but not by firing everybody first, shutting things down while you investigate. Do the investigation, work with Congress, work with these employees, do it right. It's been done before.
God damn, bro. So O'Leary, did you hear what O'Leary said? I mean, again, you either have to be a liar or know nothing. And he agreed. I would be embarrassed. You're agreeing to this debate on Doge and Elon Musk. And you don't know the first fucking thing about what you're talking about. One more time, listen to what O'Leary says.
Yes, you can't be surgically precision. There's no way to be surgically precision on this.
There's no way to be surgically precision on this? You mean surgically precise? Oh my God.
Because you just don't know. There's no way to do it. Remember, we've never audited government for 100 years. Never done this before. You may not like it.
Tom
it may
doesn't
be
think that's
traumatic.
right.
We've never audited government for 100 years. I'm happy this guy was armed with just basic information. Thank God. And unfortunately, in many of these, like, both sides debates, oftentimes you have somebody who represents the liberal side or the left side or the Democratic side that doesn't, they actually don't know all these things, right? But man, as he pointed out, we have the Inspector General. Their whole purpose is to find the waste, fraud, and abuse. Donald Trump fired them in the first week.
Help me.
Okay? Then we also have, he didn't get to this part yet, but this is also true. We have the GAO, the Government Accountability Office. They do the same thing, and they have congressional authorization to do it. So when they say, bro, nobody's ever audited anything, bro, that's just not true. The Pentagon had 7 audits. By the way, they failed all of them. All of them. The audit prior to this most recent one, I remember because I read the article on it in Responsible Statecraft, I think it was. They couldn't account for over 60% of their money. 60%. So when you, we never audited. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. And these guys be like, Elon lies on a regular basis, Trump lies on a regular basis, this guy lies on a regular basis. Guys, we have hard data on this. So the Government Accountability Office says anywhere from 3% to 7% of the federal budget is fraudulent, right? But remember they were trying to cut Social Security and they were at, 150-year-olds are getting it. That wasn't true. And we know the fraud rate in Social Security specifically is 0.84%. There's less fraud relative to other areas, and that's one they had on the fucking chopping block, just lying about it relentlessly. And by the way, the 0.84 fraud percent rate is slight overpayments to people, which I don't know about you, but I'm kind of okay with it if an 86-year-old grandma gets a little bit of extra money so she can get a ham sandwich, right? But no, Elon gives himself $20 billion in subsidies, steals $400 million more in subsidies for some Tesla shit. We just learned about that the other day. At the same time, he's slashing cancer research for kids. And they're like, bro, we got to cut Social Security like 50%, bro, because it's all fraudulent, bro. None of that is true. And then, of course, I think Kevin O'Leary is Canadian. Do you know anything about how this government works in the United States of America? We've described it before, but the way it works is Congress has the power of the purse. They pass a bill. If the president signs it, that's it. It's law. The funds go to the Treasury disperses the funds. That's it. The only people who can be involved in that process in any way, shape, or form after that point is, as we said, the Inspector General and the Government Accountability Office. That's it. Not the world's richest robber baron illegally hacking into the Treasury, stealing our bank account information, stealing our data, stealing our Social Security numbers, deleting government programs he doesn't like. And by the way, there's over a dozen, I believe, government programs that are investigating Elon Musk for his exploitative practices and his labor violations. And oh, would you look at that? Those are some of the agencies directly in the crosshairs of Elon Musk that he's dismantling. This is what we saw with the CFPB, the anti-scam police. They were going to regulate Elon Musk because Elon Musk made a deal with Visa to do financial transactions on Twitter, so they would be subject to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau regulating them. So what did he do? He killed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Why? Because he's a con artist, and he's a fraudster, and he wants to get away with fraud, and he wants all of his robber baron buddies to also be able to get away with fraud. Right? Trump gave the game away on this the other day when he was like, oh, people come up to me and they say, sir, the CFPB has ruined me, sir. Tears in their eyes. I don't doubt that happened, but you know where that happened? At Mar-a-Lago, where the head of, a giant Wall Street firm or a big bank comes up to him saying, oh my God, they're holding me accountable and not letting me commit fraud. Trump brought back junk fees. They brought back junk fees. They brought back overdraft fees, higher overdraft fees. These people don't give a fuck about you. Elon, Trump, and the lying liar Kevin O'Leary. I'll be kind. Maybe he's just a fucking idiot. Maybe he's a total moron. Maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. But either way, you shouldn't be doing this debate. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Or you do and you're lying. So, by the way, you go ask anybody in MAGA. Ask them. Ask them. Hey, I know you think Doge is going after waste, fraud, and abuse. They're not, but let's put that aside. Did the government have a way of going after waste, fraud, and abuse before Doge? Ask. Watch what happens. Not a single one will bring up the Inspectors General. Not a single one will bring up the Government Accountability Office. None of them will mention it. None of them. Unbelievable. And by the way, this is a nice moment here, but I also do want to say, for clarity's sake, you can't have a media environment where you have Fox News, One America News Network, Newsmax, The Daily Wire, all of these committed right-wing outlets that do MAGA propaganda on a daily basis. And then the outlets that are not that, all day long is both sides shit. All day long is false equivalence. It's both sides. Oh, let's bring on some absolute dead-eyed psychopath who's a MAGA supporter to lie on a panel with 4 non-MAGA supporters. Then the whole conversation gets derailed, where now you got to debunk this guy's bullshit. What about just having a news network? Here's a crazy idea. Oops, sorry. Take this thing again. I'm making a habit of that. What about having a news network that just tells the truth? Just tells the truth. And if we're going to have that, sorry, people like Kevin O'Leary are not allowed on. Because they're either idiots or they're liars. They're either ignorant or they're liars. There's no other way around it. So they are poisoning our information system. That's the bottom line. They're poisoning it. And then nobody gets real truth. Nobody gets the straight dope with no fucking spin. Right? And they got to come to YouTube assholes like me to give it to them, which is not good. That's not good. I'd rather have the truth being broadcast on major media outlets as well. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.
help me! Please, help me! magnificent. I never expected to get out of there alive. My name is Frake. I am known as a sage. I thought my magic would give me an edge against these demons, but how wrong I was. I have been enfeebled by my long imprisonment, but I can still move my legs, and I can make it back to the Nexus. I thank the stars that I escaped when I did. I owe you my life. What in the devil is wrong with you? I have been, but I...
Hello again. I'm keeping a close... You have a heart of gold.
It's simple. In trade, I'll give you weapon with your souls. I can eke out a living. No interest.
King Allant led Boletaria with the royal twin fangs, Valafax and Bjor, and the brave tribesman Longbow Ulan and his fearsome legions. But today, Boletaria is an abysmal mess. Valafax was lost, and Bjor slipped through the fissure, never to be heard from again. All the rest, along with Boletaria, have been devoured by the fog, and will soon be prey to the demons. The Boletarian Knights are no longer. But perhaps our age will see the rise of new heroes, such as yourself.
You saved Sage Frake, did you not? Then I was right to bend the rules, and nevertheless, Do you see how important selfless acts are in this dreary world? What is it? Are you still... so better than having you bother... Wait.
I have a... Could you bring your demon souls to me as I determine more about the essence of the soul? I can teach you new magic. A demon soul is no mere amalgamation of lesser soul. You have your wits about you. Do not pay attention to them if they... Prayer is for the foolish, and heaven forbid the day you find... I was defeated. Beware of him. He has power. Bring me... I patient...
Better than that. I'm not done yet.
But among them, could this...
Do you see? A miracle. They have magician. Now come back. That hard...
Thou seeketh soul, then touch. As for me, I keep the candles lit and serve the brave demon slayers. Soul of the mind, key to life's ether. Soul of the lost, withdrawn from its vessel. Let strength be granted so the world might be mended. So the world might be mended. Art thou the main that? Thou the soul of the mind, key to life. I shall await. I am.
Hello again. I'm keep. You have a heart of gold.
I can... Do come back.
system software for high-volume platforms, i.e. personal systems. This means that major ongoing investments will be for low-end desktops, notebooks,
I have obtained the book. That's it for weather. Over to you, El. Hello, El. Now I know where you live. What? Hello, El. A bunch of policemen hire. Your son is definite. When your son just died, your son is party. Yes. You're kind of ruining my plan. I'm an armor. This is how I win and become the god of the new world. Now she's in custody. What? Oh my god, I just had the dumbest idea. And then he wiped his memory to prove that he was Randy. I just got my memory back. My terrible plan even ended up being the one to kill El. Whoops. The bells, the never-ending bells.
Of it to the enemy, Trump said. If we're going to play billions of dollars yesterday, I don't know if any of you guys are cool enough to be somebody who actually tunes in every day, okay? But yesterday, I said that there was only 2 ways that the Jeffrey Epstein files were ever going to come to the public. And thank God I talked about it yesterday before this happened, okay? So I could get myself on the record before it happened. I said there's only 2 ways that it's going to happen. I said number 1 is that they never bring it up again. They never talk about Jeffrey who? Jeffrey huh? And the reason would be is because there's something somewhere about Donald Trump's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, where Jeffrey Epstein said in 2017 that he was Donald's closest friend for 10 years. Trump said that Jeffrey was his friend, but he liked his women on the younger side. This is, these things in themselves are not like guilty, send them to prison, There's in themselves, they're just what they are. Things that make you feel uncomfortable, and like every time I hear that and think that's the president, that makes me feel bad, Like not because I know, I'd rather not know because that'd be, but I kind of have to know because it'd be immoral and it's just bad, and I hope it's just not true. The type of thing that makes you squirm.
Morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Thank you so much for the gifted UTV. I appreciate that. Over to Nike. Congratulations, Nike. It's that type of thing, Now that's the first option. The second option was they released something due to public pressure that was building, which I could see building, from Likely and others. And the result of that would be they release what we already know for something with basically multiple black pages completely inked out. But in there lies the atomic codes. We got option 2. If anyone's curious what we got option 2. Okay, I feel confident on my bullishness yesterday. No new big revelations expected in Justice Department's release of Epstein files. Attorney General Pam Bondi is expected to publicly release flight logs and other government documents related to wealthy financier Jeffrey Epstein on Thursday, though the files are unlikely to include new bombshells about sex trafficking cases. The documents being released by the Justice Department are unlikely to satisfy online sleuths eager for fresh details about Epstein's crimes and connections to famous people that have long been the subject of intense scrutiny. The Justice Department said the first batch, expected to be posted online later Thursday, is largely made up of files that have already been circulating in the public domain since Epstein died by suicide in a Manhattan federal jail a month after his arrest. Before the documents were publicly released, binders that read The Epstein Files Part 1 were given at the White House to conservative political commentators with large followings on X, formerly known as Twitter. The binders read Declassified, though it was not immediately clear if the files had ever even been classified, and described Trump's White House as the most Trump transparent administration. Bondi suggested in a Thursday letter to FBI Director Kash Patel that more records were recently discovered. She ordered the FBI to hand over the full and complete Epstein files to her by Friday morning, and directed Patel to conduct an immediate investigation into why her order to the FBI to turn over all the documents was not followed. Okay. So, everything they're releasing is stuff we already know. That's the long and short of it. Everything they're releasing and doing this big public show that these dumb schmucks, by the way, the guy on the left, that's DC Drano, by the way. He's one of the biggest Neanderthals on Twitter. Try to stay away from this tweet. They'll give you actual brain aids. This is a public service announcement. This is not a political critique. This is a warning for everyone, Trump supporters included. This is a man who would believe the dumbest of dumbest bullshit. These are the type of people that see like airsoft videos of like Russians like shooting at people speaking like chopped up English, and then they fall over and go, ah, and they say, wow, oh my gosh, what a brutal war. Another American mercenary killed. This is why nobody should go over there. It's like the easy smucks, right? That's who they brought to this, to hold up these declassified documents. We don't even know if it's classified. And it's all just information we already know. It's all just information we already know. And also, recognize that the people that this is being given to, they're all Trump signatures. Let's say for a moment that these files actually included something that was negative about Trump. Something that was like, hello, I am Donald J. Trump. I like the news, right? From like an Epstein reporting. Do you think that DC Drano would undo a decade of political loyalty and activism and cultish-like behavior in order to reveal that to the public if that actually was real? Do you think they would ever give that information, if they ever give that information out, to anyone who would actually reveal it? Why do you think Donald Trump right now is taking the press pool and the White House Correspondents Association, breaking them over his knee and saying, we're going to choose the press pool now. We're going to choose the president. Shall choose who covers the president and how they cover the president. And if you give a little bit too much critical critique of the president, then maybe you shall not cover the president any longer. Basically, Donald Trump's angry that during these, briefings and during these press conferences, there are journalists from organizations that will not lick the dirt off his soles. And so he wants them gone. He wants them gone, or he wants to make it so there's only one organization in there that will ask him difficult questions. And it'll then be questions like, what color are you gonna paint all the planes flying back all the illegals? So, Mr. President, what Bible verse inspires you the most? Maybe not that one. Failed that one before. The point is, it's gonna be the sycophants. And so, if this is the type of sycophantic dedication that he's getting in the press pool, do you think if he ever actually had anything of import that could reveal something compromising about his side of the aisle or any ally of his or himself especially, that he would give it to a bunch of internet sleuths, even if they're ones cultishly devoted to him? No. And that's why the files are all stuff we've already seen, and that's why if they release anything else, and that's why it says phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 is only going to be information that is against those he does not like. I honestly believe that. I believe that if Trump releases anything, he will selectively release it the same way that WikiLeaks selectively released the information on the hacks into the Hillary campaign, where they said they had both files from the RNC and the DNC, and they just chose to only release the ones from the DNC. That they do that for a purpose. Why do they do that? Because it's to have a certain effect. It's not about transparency. It's about transparency on one side to affect the public one way. If we know all the Democrats that are vetoes on this list, and they are all exposed, and we don't get a bunch of Republicans, you know what that means? If that's the end result, though, and I'm just making the point in advance, I mean, Donald Trump is protecting pedophiles within the Republican Party. I mean, Donald Trump is protecting pedophiles within the Republican Party, and is probably using the fact that they're pedophiles against them as leverage against them. So, what is released and who is exposed in this? What names are released? Whether or not there's anybody that is a Trump ally or in the Trump circle or within his side of the party, that should be paid attention to. Because I don't think this is beneath him. If it was beneath him, then he wouldn't have nominated Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General, to be the top law enforcement official in the country. Why would you choose a Kenny Dittler to be the top law enforcement official in the country? Only as somebody who's, constantly going after it, I'm going to go after each state, and his followers are like, oh, we need to go after these underground sex cabals, sex trafficking cabals. Then he picks Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. Might as well just pick Jeffrey Epstein to be Attorney General. Why not? Either way, they're never going to release anything on... They're never going to release anything of import. But if they ever do, it'll only be on those that are enemies of Trump. It will not be Trump. I think that we've fundamentally shifted how the Attorney General's office and how these types of transparency efforts are done. And I don't think that has any interest at all in revealing anything. Do you think DeSantis won't let the Tate brothers in order because he's worried they'll compete with him for the sex trafficking tariff? My goodness. You guys want to go over to the Tate brothers quick? Yeah, what a bunch of... Look at these. Look at these clowns. They think they're so fucking important. He has fucking... Look how many MAGA hats he has in his hand. DC Drano. Look how many MAGA... Oh my god, man. Carry on the armband. Okay. You guys wanted the Tate brothers, right? I just saw somebody brought up the Tate brothers. We can talk about the Tate brothers quick. I don't have a lot to say about it. I mean, it's kind of obvious what happened. So, the Tate brothers, Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate, have left Romania after Romanian prosecutors lifted a travel ban on them. Now, the way that Romania had been handling it is, we believe that if we let them out of the country, they're not going to come back. So we want to make sure that we go through all the evidence, go through all the investigation. We see if there's anything we can get on these guys, basically, to be blunt. And then we'll let them go eventually if they don't find anything, which they're still ridiculous. They had stuff. I mean, everyone has stuff, because, Andrew Tate is, on camera saying, I steal from my hookers. I like to steal from them. I lie to them about their taxes. And I tell them, excuse me, but the taxes took this much out, and then I pocket the money. He said that. Now, whether that was just fun and he was joking and haha, and now let's say that is the case. That means he's encouraging his audience to, like, the stealing and doing that towards sex workers is funny and good, and you should do that. And that's the type of behavior it's encouraging. He's encouraging that amongst, like, the youth and stuff. It's bad. Bad. But also, like, do we really buy that? I don't buy it. Either way, Romania was not letting them leave because they still wanted them to face trial in Romania. Donald Trump then gets involved after he gets elected, pressures the Romanian government to release the Tate brothers. We've known about this for weeks. And now the travel ban on them has been lifted. They immediately left the country, and now they're in court. British-American influencer Andrew and Jessica Tate, who are facing trial in Romania on charges including human trafficking, have arrived in the U.S. after Romania prosecutors lifted a 2-year travel ban. Andrew Tate, 38, and brother Tristan, 36, have strongly denied the allegations against them. The two departed Bucharest on a private jet early on Thursday and arrived in Florida hours later, with Andrew telling reporters they are misunderstood. Romanian prosecutors stressed the case against them had not been dropped, and they remain under judicial control, meaning they have to regularly report to authorities and are expected to return to Romania. However, the accident sparked concern that prosecutors felt political pressure from the Trump administration. The U.S. president said he knew nothing about the Tate brothers being released. The Tate brothers are accused of human trafficking, forcing an organized group to sexually exploit women in Romania. Andrew Tate is also accused of rape. In the U.S., they also face a civil case of a woman who alleges the brothers coerced her into sex work and then defamed her after she gave evidence to Romanian authorities. The brothers also face separate charges in the UK of rape and human trafficking. They deny all the allegations against them. Upon arrival, Andrew Tate told reporters, "We live in a democratic society where it's innocent until proven guilty, and I think my brother and I are largely misunderstood. There's a lot of opinions about us, a lot of things that got around about us on the internet," he said, adding that they are yet to be convicted of any crime in our lives ever. The brothers declined to answer questions about their release. They're you know why Trump loves them? Because they're like Trump. They defend themselves as like Trump. They rely on the crowd. They rely on media, schemes, and bullshit. They just like deny. Will never provide any evidence. If somebody provides evidence to them directly, they'll just like say, no, that's fake, or I don't care, or they'll just ignore it. Because the thing is, they've been confronted with them committing crimes knowingly before. They've committed 2 crimes publicly before. We know that they are criminals. It's a question of whether they're going to be convicted for any crimes. They're not misunderstood. It's a question of whether or not every single thing that the court is bringing against them is true, and whether or not they're going to get found guilty of anything or ever held accountable for anything. And in this case, it might not be the case, especially since if they're not in Romania, they could just decide to not go back. And if Trump says, I don't want them to go back, or they don't have to go back, what's going to happen? The lawyer for the Tate brothers, Joseph McBride, said they'll return to Romania at the end of March to meet the prosecutors before returning to the U.S. They feel secure in America for several reasons, the primary one being that Donald Trump is the president. As a result, they are excited to call America their home again. Now, I'm sure he didn't do anything. As did the administration pressured the Romanian government to release them, he said, I know nothing about that. I don't know. You're saying he's on a plane right now? UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who was sitting next to Trump in the White House, said, there's an English element here, so obviously it's important just human trafficking is obviously, in my mind, a security risk. Excuse me, let me just chime in and say trafficking is bad, as the British Prime Minister quickly. Can I just emphasize that I think trafficking is not good? God, what a risk. Every criminal who is willing to swear fealty to Trump will get protection as president of the United States. Well, I don't know. I remember Roger Stone got pretty boned. Doesn't help that Barron Trump is a fan of Tate. That is true. Apple does not fall too far from the tree, as they say. Kind of hard when you're surrounded with all that, though, huh? Kind of doomed from the get-go. Okay, moving on. Do you guys, you know what? I think it's time we talk about the Ukraine stuff. I think it's time. Oh boy. One's a doozy. This one's a doozy. This shows exactly what I thought. This just shows what I thought Trump was going to be like. The flip-flopping on security policy, making promises, undercutting previous promises committed, then recommitting, then making it vague, then uncommitting again, and flip-flop, 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 flip-flop. We're getting a lot of that. We're getting a lot of that. We're getting a lot of Russian apologia. We're getting a lot of public concessions. We're getting a lot of piss-poor deal-making from the deal-maker-in-chief. And now, he had a meeting with Keir Starmer where he then went back on what his administration was trying to do, which was cleaning up Pete Hegseth's mess. So, Pete Hegseth went to Munich. I think it was Munich, but he went to Europe, and he spoke to the Europeans. And while speaking to the Europeans, he suggested, while doing this tour of Europe, that NATO membership was off the table for Ukraine. Also that US troops were off the table, and a bunch of stuff was off the table. And then others reacted to this negatively because some people within the Republican Party still have some sense of how, diplomacy works or geopolitics works. There might be a diplomat or two within the Republican Party, within the entire apparatus of the Republican Party, and they're realizing, like, wait a second, you don't want to give that up right off the bat unless you get concessions. And so Pete Hegseth then went out in public, the unexperienced Fox News host, and goes, wait, let me just reel this back. Thank you. I didn't take, I don't want to take away the options from the president, and, I don't want to take away from his leverage, and yada yada, and he reeled it back. And then Donald Trump had this meeting with Keir Starmer, and then he worked to undo all that backpedaling, and then went straight back forward with NATO membership is off the table, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Let's get into it. Let's see a report from CBS on the meeting, and then we're going to take some snippets from the meeting and break them down.
As UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer pulled up to the White House today,
President Trump, can you get a peace deal done in Ukraine?
Yes. Ukraine was top of mind before he and President Trump even got inside. In the Oval Office,
we're going to be discussing many things today.
Starmer, the Labour Party leader, made his pitch for the U.S. to include Ukraine and all of Europe in negotiations.
We want to work with you to make sure that peace deal is enduring, that it lasts, that it's a deal that goes down as a historic deal, that nobody breaches.
But for his tougher asks, Starmer brought a sweetener, a letter direct from King Charles, inviting Trump for a historic second state visit 7 years after his first.
The answer is yes. On behalf of our wonderful First Lady, Melania, and myself, the answer is yes.
From there, Trump gave a show.
Can I just throw something out there quick? So, I believe that, yes, to some extent, you're going to have to flatter Trump. I think the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands as, for example, the head of NATO was a great pick. He's somebody who's widely considered like a Trump whisperer. I think he's going to do the job well. I would have preferred an Eastern European, but outside of an Eastern European, I think he's probably the best next pick, definitely when it comes to dealing with Trump. And yes, that's going to come with some flattery and saying, you're smart enough to know that the Russians want X, Y, and Z. And, negotiation takes X, this. So what pathway should we take? Should we do good? There's a way you would have to talk to him that I understand that will include some amount of flattery. But don't think that you just, give him, oh, come meet the queen. Or, well, I guess, no, come meet the king. Oh, come over to our country, have some beans and toast, and we'll flatter you, and you go fish, and we'll come spend some time at your magnificent hotel. Don't think that's all gonna lead to him giving you what you want. I'm not saying that doesn't help him have a better view of you if you're nice to him. Like, if you go in there and say, sup, cunt, I think he's not going to take you kindly. But the problem is, if you go in there and you start brown-nosing him, you don't think that no matter how unintelligent somebody might think Donald Trump is in certain areas, like, for example, geopolitics or Eastern European history or any of the things that he is putting his fingers in like he's an expert. But you don't think he can see groveling when he sees it? You don't think he can see brown-nosing when he sees it? How do you think he reads that? Do you think he reads that as, oh, this is a strong ally for me, who I can work with on a productive basis to get things done because I like him personally? Or do you think he smells blood? He sees weakness and he thinks, how much can I bleed this man dry until he's a stone? I think it's the latter. I really do. And I think part of the reason that he's so friendly with the oligarch, with the foreign authoritarians and the oligarchs like Putin and the Orban, is because they kind of have they do give off the air of, you know, the type of strongman like aesthetic that he likes. They know how to flatter him enough by just kind of like treating him like one of the boys, but he also like treats them and he sees them like killers. Like these are tough guys, you know, and he sees their displays of toughness through mafia-esque actions that he can basically understand, that are too base for him not to understand. And so if you just come up to him and you just brown nose him, he's gonna run over you. And I know this is maybe a little unorthodox, definitely if I'm saying this of U.S. allies, but I think you need to bloody the nose of the U.S. president's way. I think that you need to do what Malcolm Turnbull did and what others did, which isn't like, oh, fuck you, but you just be clear, like, no, this is my interest. I have to do this. You know, if you stand strong and you show clear to him where your interests lie, then he's going to act differently near them. That's how Zelensky went from a deal where he was going to have to give up half of Ukraine's natural wealth, critical ports, critical infrastructure, $500 billion for about $110 billion worth of aid. I mean, that's like 2 to 3 times greater than Ukraine's GDP. And he went from that to a joint investment fund, getting wealth from Ukrainian materials, which then invests into the Ukrainian economy and then goes back into the investment fund. They went from America is extracting resources from Ukraine like a colony in exchange for its support, but I would say lackluster considering the price tag. And that changed to a joint investment deal between the United States and Ukraine for rebuilding, that's where the money goes. See, and that was done through Zelensky saying no, standing out in public, and then you want to know what Trump did? He sent out Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz went out there, he said they need to shut up and take the deal. You had his base going out there, hitting the war drum. Boom, boom, boom. Trump must be strong again. Trump must be tough again. Like he was against the Mexicans. No, he wasn't. Like he was against the Canadians. No, he wasn't. And then once that drumbeat has gone on for about a week, once there's been enough lambasting of the Ukrainians, once Trump has called Zelensky a dictator while refusing to call Putin one, eventually they accept the new deal, a new compromise solution, which is much closer to Ukraine's interest, while also well within Trump's interest. So instead of bleeding Ukraine like a stone, they work with them from an advantageous position. And that was only done by Zelensky saying no and not just brown-nosing and rolling over. In fact, you want to know what I would have done? And maybe this would have been a little, I don't know, controversial, but I think either Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron should have told Trump that they will veto his UN resolution if it does not include a direct condemnation of the Russians in the resolution, and if not, he shouldn't try to pass it at all. Could have been one of them. All he needed is one of them to test the water. One plays good cop, one plays bad cop, but you gotta show that you're deeply, deeply interested in protecting Ukrainian interests and European interests, and you're willing to back it up with force. And that's why Europe has prepared retaliatory measures when it comes to, for example, sanctions. You just got to be willing to pull the trigger on it. That's what Trump, in his recent first cabinet meeting, talked about 25% sanctions against the European Union across the board, which because they don't take enough agricultural goods, even though they're our fourth largest agricultural trading partner.
Wonderful First Lady Melania and myself, the answer is yes.
From there, Trump gave a show of confidence that a peace deal between Kyiv and Moscow would hold. Starmer, as well as French President Emmanuel Macron, have both agreed to send troops to the region to keep the peace if a deal is reached. The U.S., on the other hand...
I don't think we're going to even be necessary, but I don't think there'll be any problem with keeping the deal with the security.
Earlier Earlier this week, Starmer announced UK's defense budget will rise to 2.5% by 2027, a move clearly aimed at pleasing Trump.
We get along very famously, as you would say.
Then under the Labour Party, there's the increasing defense spending right now seems to be a bipartisan issue in British politics. And so is supporting Ukraine. I don't know if you guys saw, but Nigel Farage, longtime Ukraine critic, I don't know if he if this shows some actual shift in him. I doubt it. But it might just be him noticing the political winds. He says that Ukraine being inside of NATO is probably essential for a peace deal. Nigel Farage, Brexit Nigel Farage, believes Ukraine has to be in NATO for a peace deal. So it shows the amount of bipartisanship that is in British politics over support for Ukraine. And it also shows Nigel Farage trying to somewhat normalize his party so they can actually try to overtake the Conservatives. Even if he doesn't personally believe it, and I still think that he probably is a Russia apologist in sheep's clothing.
But as Trump praised Starmer, he indicated he trusts Russian President Vladimir Putin to stick to any peace deal.
I've known him for a long time now, and I think he will. I don't believe he's going to violate his word.
That in stark contrast to how Starmer behaved to Putin at the question.
It sounds as though one of you completely trusts Putin, and one of you doesn't trust him either.
At the same time, Trump played up his relationship with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
By the way, can I just throw this out there? Like, Trump didn't just like a little bit say he trusts Putin. He kept saying he trusts Putin again and again and again. He keeps saying this recently. And honestly, this is stupid. This is really stupid. Now, it might be good for short-term politics, but like, if Trump cares at all about his brand, if they relaunch the war, then Trump was shown to be a liar. And so if he makes a shaky foundation and they restart the war, he'll be shown to be a liar. The problem is, like, I think that'll hurt him. Maybe he thinks he can just lie his way out of that and just say, like, well, the reason they started the war is because the Democrats, they thought they were going to win the election. Or, well, the Democrats recently won that election, and now, you know, J.D. Vance lost in 2028, so they invaded because Democrats came in. I was keeping the peace. Even though he built the foundations for war by building a shaky foundation. He'll sell it either way. But, like, when he talks about, like, trusting Putin, like, how much he trusts Putin, it's not going to play well. I don't care how much he pivots it. If people can say, I trust Putin, there won't be a war, he won't relaunch it, he won't do this, he won't do that, and then you can just splice that followed by Ukraine being invaded by tanks. I mean, we saw how those people were humiliated, like Hassan and Mearsheimer at the start of the invasion when they said it was impossible Ukraine was going to get invaded. Then they got invaded. Some people still choose to take these people seriously on the issue. But for a moment, people saw the truth about the matter. So I hope the same thing would be true. But to say that you trust a man who's already violated these agreements like twice is not pushing towards an agreement or diplomacy. It comes off as dumb naivete. That's what it comes off as.
At the same time, Trump played up his relationship with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who will be in Washington tomorrow to sign off on a critical minerals deal. Reporters pointed out comments Trump clearly made about Zelensky online just last week.
Mr. President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that.
Trump stood by.
This is what the next 4 years is going to be, by the way. Trump says something, he has an effect on the public, he informs the public, Zelensky's a dictator. And then some people in his base was like, I knew it, I heard this on the Tucker Carlson show, and they go with it. It undermines Ukraine's support in the United States. And then once he's gotten the diplomatic leverage he thought he was getting by just like lying about the people he was negotiating against, in this instance, Ukraine, then afterwards it's like, oh, what? No, I never said. I don't know what you mean. What? He does the damage and then pretend he never did anything. He said it. We all saw it. He just thinks this is funny. And I looked into MAGA space and how they were reacting to it. They thought this is funny too. They think it's funny to just call him a dictator and then reel it back in. They think it's funny to make people think, oh, democracy doesn't matter. Democracy doesn't matter in this struggle. There's no difference between having no civil society and having a civil society. There's no difference between being able to be in Ukraine and say Zelensky's a cunt and not being able to do that in Russia. say Putin's a guy. There's like no difference between these things, right? That this false equivalence is damaging to the Ukrainian cause. Deeply damaging. Oh my goodness, dude. A piece of dust just went. Anyway, it's highly damaging to the Ukrainian cause, and he doesn't even want to take credit for doing that damage.
His push for tariffs, including with Europe. Throughout, both leaders stressed the importance of a strong U.S.-UK alliance. But Trump, not so subtly, reminded his counterpart about their relative strength.
Could you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well,
Awkward moments became more open disagreement when a reporter asked about Vice President Vance's criticisms of the UK. Earlier,
here's a question. Could the United States take on Russia without Europe? Could the United States take on China economically without Europe? If Europe doesn't participate in any of the sanction regimes against China, definitely when Germany already has like a manufacturing crisis in the car sector, many countries are already dealing with economic problems, and you want them to shut off the country's largest exporter from going into their countries because of a crisis in Taiwan when we won't care about their own backyard? Look, I'm not like a Europaboo. I don't know what you would call it, a Europaboo. I'm not in here saying all hail the European Union or whatever. What I am saying is that if you just treat like the European Union's people as a bunch of limp-wristed pencil necks who don't know what they're doing and have no leverage because their military spending has been dog doo-doo up to this point, what you're going to end up doing is forget the real leverage that they have, and then you're going to isolate yourselves in future diplomatic crises, and it's going to be difficult for you to, you know, for example, if you want to actually challenge the Chinese economically to dissuade an invasion, it's going to be more difficult to rally the Europeans if you weren't there for them. If you aren't there for them, why are they going to be there for you? Especially if it's not in their economic interest to be there for you. Point is, my general point is just like having allies is good, and it is true that like the United Kingdom alone wouldn't be able to take down Russia, but it also wouldn't be the United Kingdom alone.
This month, Vance decried the UK as censoring free speech, particularly religious expression. Today, Vance seemed focused on the internet and how to handle inflammatory, sometimes threatening speech, arguing British policy blocking some was a U.S. concern.
What the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
Okay, but if we're saying that, then let me just throw this out there. Does that mean that for all the call of deporting those who protested against Israel at like campuses, or what they say, pro-Hamas protesters or whatever, across college campuses, deporting their citizens, does that mean that they could deport their American citizens from their countries if they do protests or stuff that they don't like? Let's say somebody was to, I don't know, like do some like really crazy red pill protest, or I don't know, whatever. They could deport them. Did they make that call? Like, this can become reciprocal. And if there's anything that could encourage the Europeans to unite as a bloc, in one way, I think actually being between the Russians and the Americans and being in this problem, this crisis, it's bad in most ways. The one way it's good is that it might wake the Europeans up towards some bloc unity. But if that's the case, then it's going to make it much harder for us to strong-arm any of these countries on a unilateral basis.
Starmer immediately responded with a polite back off.
Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there. This has been a very good and very productive visit.
Side by side at an afternoon news conference, the two leaders continued working on the latest version
Thank you very much.
of their country's special relationship.
Now, there's one thing that PBS chose not to include that I think that they should have included, and it was the problem I was showing earlier, or was talking about earlier, which is that Pete Hegseth went out there, said no NATO for Ukraine, that he walked it back after backlash from within his party and outside his party, saying you're undermining your leverage before negotiations, who went out public and said I would never want to undermine the president, and then the president went out there and next to Keir Starmer undermined himself in negotiations, taking it off the table, giving himself less leverage. Art of the deal, everyone. Art of the deal. He had a chance to save himself, and he chose to disregard it.
The Europeans want Ukraine to be part of NATO as part of this deal. Are you willing to budge on that at all, or is it a firm?
Well, I could be very nice and say, oh, well, we'll work to it. Look, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. That's what started this whole thing. Biden said that, and all of a sudden the gun started. That was one of the primary reasons it started. And this was long before President Putin. They never said it was an impossibility. So we can say, oh, gee, well, we'll try, but that's something that's just not going to happen. And then the other question they ask is about the land. Will you get your land back? Well, they've fought long and hard on the land, and you and I will be discussing that, and we're going to certainly try and get as much as we can back. But on the NATO, it's just not, that's not going to happen. Yeah, please.
The second part, I mean, like, if you're trying to find a silver lining here, like, we're going to try to get as much of the land back, isn't the worst thing you could hear. The worst thing you could hear is, I mean, like, Russia's annexed it. I mean, it's there. You know, the worst thing you could hear is like, oh shit, does that mean they're giving up Europe? Like, I could imagine worse things, but let's not hold ourselves to the standard of, let's hold the President of the United States. He's not literally pushing Ukrainians while calling them coal holes in the camp. So let's, oh, woohoo, yay. You know, no, we're not doing that. We're going to hold the president to a higher standard than that. Because we should hold the president to a higher standard than that. Because he's the president of the United States. So, the first thing here is, okay, before we get into, like, Trump's fantastic historical acumen, let's just get into, like, the basics of negotiating here. The Russians want things. The Americans want things. What do the Americans want in a perfect world? Well, in a perfect world, they would want the Russians out of Ukraine. They would want Ukraine, I imagine, if we're talking about all of Ukraine and its alliance, if we're talking about this whole alliance, they would want Ukraine to get its land back. And they would want to set up a foundation that would stop Russia from invading Ukraine again, right? Russia out of Ukraine, Ukraine get its land, build up foundation for peace, and rebuilding project. Now, there's some other stuff like the returning of children, POWs, for example, accountability for war crimes. But those are like the big ticket issues that everyone's discussing and are the biggest sticking point. Even though the Russians are never going to turn over their war criminals, they're going to want to give them medals on state TV for the next 2 to 3 decades, calling the Bucha massacre perpetrators like heroes on radio programs and award them and stuff. Because that's the culture. That's the political culture that's currently in Russia. Now, if you want those things, the only way you can get those things is if you convince the Russian that the only way that they'll get what they want is by giving at least some of those things up to some extent, partially or totally. For example, you want NATO not in Ukraine, then you got to give Ukraine its land back. That right there, boom. If you talk to Ukrainians and hey, no NATO membership, but you get back all your land, what I'm sure most would almost certainly take it, honestly. Now, they probably would want some agreement to stop a future invasion, maybe a unilateral defense pact between France and Germany and the United Kingdom and Ukraine, whatever it would be, unilateral defense pact instead of NATO to stop future invasions, or whatever. That would be an instance of compromise, because you're giving up, you're using your leverage to get something you want, and they're using their leverage to get something they want, which is NATO out of Ukraine. This is a very broad stroked idea. This is not like my proposal for the peace solution. My point is, this is generally how negotiations are supposed to work. And before the negotiations have really started, they're just like, when I say before they've started, I mean they're just getting underway. As in, like, they're just starting to meet, the delegations are just starting to meet in Istanbul. They're just starting like the diplomatic missions. They haven't even really started like drawing the lines or whatever. They haven't even started that, and we already have given up NATO membership. We've already given up American troops in Ukraine, which is the deterrence leverage. We've already given up leverage when it comes to the Russians wanting an election in Ukraine and the end of martial law so Ukrainian men can flee, which is what I think is what they want. Of course, maybe you think that Vladimir Putin cares about Ukrainian democracy and that Donald Trump cares about the liberalization and democratization of the Ukrainian state. Maybe that's the planet you're on, but I am on planet Earth, okay? You've given up that. You've given up so much when it comes to Ukraine and its basic interests of wanting to be at the table. That is a big point. That's a big point for the Ukrainian people. 91% of Ukrainians say that they don't want to do a peace deal if they're not at the table negotiating, right? That's a huge concession, them not being at the table. No troops, no NATO. No, they're not at the table to discuss their own future. They're probably not getting all their land back. Another concession they made publicly. And something he's kind of reiterating a bit here. We're going to try to get all of it. We're going to try to get as much as we can. Not we're going to try to get all of it back. And he didn't even attempt to say at one point he's going to try that. A deal for deal. He's setting the standard that Russia's going to keep stuff right off from the get-go. Just giving up leverage, giving up leverage, giving up leverage, giving up leverage. And so, where is this art of the deal? Where is this deal maker in chief? Okay? Because if that deal maker in chief or that deal maker from somewhere around him doesn't step off, Keith Kellogg doesn't grab the steering wheel and turn it this way or turn it that way, Donald Trump might, well, hit the iceberg, sink the peace deal, and then we'll have war through 2025. And you want to know what? I think that's a very probable outcome. Talks with Russia, Trump repeats his Afghanistan playbook. Trump's negotiation strategy in Afghanistan resulted in capitulation to the Taliban, abandoning of U.S. allies. Experts see strong parallels to how he's dealing with Russia today. When they know you want out and they know you won't stay in, it's just a waiting game. And let me just tell you, Trump is giving up all this leverage, as Trump is brown-nosing the Russians both diplomatically and publicly about their history. While that's all going on, the Russians are escalating the war. They're continuing to strike major Ukrainian cities. I just had a conversation with my friend the other day about his family members getting killed in Russian strikes. A husband, a wife, and their son. These are continuing. These strikes are continuing. The military buildup is continuing, and North Korea is continuing to send more troops. And you want to know what? I do think that this at least is partially due to the Trump administration. The Biden administration, in response to North Korea sending its troops and having North Korea invading Europe, allowed long-range strikes against Russia, which Trump said was a mistake and dangerous and too escalatory and that we needed to reel it back. That's what he said in response. But he did that, Biden, in part to try to respond to this escalation from the Russians, as in to say, you escalate, we escalate, so you better stop. It's a warning of, we can play this game, I don't know if you'll win. It's something you might call peace through power, peace through, I don't know, courageousness. Somebody will think of a slogan. Toughness, of course. Peace through somebody will think of a slogan that aligns with that. But the point is that it was a response to deter them. Now, with Trump coming into office and with $3.8 billion presidential drawdown authority just sitting there, and the only threat I've seen him make towards the Russians was on the campaign trail. Maybe they'll escalate aid. Haven't sent any aid since getting into office. They haven't signed any new presidential drawdown authority